The land stretched wide and empty under the burning western sun. Miles of golden fields and dust trails surrounded the lonely ranch where Eli Hartman lived. He was a man of few words, hardened by years of loss, silence, and the unending grind of ranch life. His neighbors rarely saw him, and when they did, it was always with a bowed head beneath his hat, a scarred face half hidden in shadows, and a voice that seemed locked away. Eli had once been a man of laughter and love. But the war had taken his brother, and sickness had taken his parents. His young bride, Clara, had followed not long after, lost in childbirth. Since then, silence was his only companion. For 7 years, he lived with cattle, horses, and the lonely howl of coyotes at night. Yet even a silent heart yearns. And when the catalog offered mail-order brides, Eli, hesitant but desperate for warmth in his cold house, sent for one. The advertisement promised a virgin bride, untouched and hopeful, a woman ready to start a new life with a hardworking rancher. Eli expected innocence, sweetness, maybe even someone who could make him feel like a man again, not just a ghost walking the land. But when the stagecoach rolled in, dust swirling around the small town station, what stepped out was not what he expected. She was young, yes, but not untouched. Her dress was plain, worn at the hem, her hands trembling as they clutched a small carpetbag. And her eyes, they were not filled with girlish excitement. They were oceans of grief, carrying storms too old for her face. "I am Margaret," she whispered, her voice trembling as though afraid he might send her back. Eli froze. The men nearby muttered. A couple of cowboys laughed under their breath, whispering that the silent rancher had ordered a virgin and got a widow instead. A widow. Her wedding band still gleamed faintly on her finger. She had not removed it. She stood stiff, like a woman bracing herself for rejection. Eli said nothing. His silence stretched, the weight of it making her shift nervously. Her tears glistened in the corners of her eyes, ready to fall if he turned away. But then, something inside him broke. Her voice, though soft, cracked against his silence. It reminded him of Clara's last words, of the prayers whispered over graves, of how fragile life really was. And before he knew what he was doing, he reached out and took her bag. Without a word, he led her to his horse. The ranch was quiet that evening. Margaret sat at the table, unsure whether she belonged. She had expected a stern man, maybe even cruelty, stories of men who bought brides to use them without kindness. She had braced for it. But instead, Eli remained silent. He served her stew, pushed bread toward her, and sat across the table without a word. It was unbearable, and yet, safe. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. "My husband," she whispered, staring at her hands, "died in the mines. Buried alive. I had nothing left. No family, no home. The agency said you needed a bride." Her voice cracked. "They didn't tell me you asked for a virgin. I understand if you send me away." Her tears fell then, silent and heavy. Eli's hands clenched around his cup. He looked at her, really looked at her. The grief, the loneliness, the desperate need for belonging. It was his own reflection. He reached out, his rough hand covering hers. She gasped at the unexpected gentleness. His voice, hoarse and unused, finally broke the silence. "Stay." It was one word, but it was enough. Days turned to weeks. Margaret filled the ranch with a soft presence Eli hadn't known he needed. She hummed while cooking, her voice fragile but healing, like a prayer drifting across the plains. Eli found himself listening, leaning toward the sound as though it stitched together the torn pieces of his heart. At night, he lay awake, hearing her muffled sobs through the wall. He wanted to comfort her, but the words were hard to find. So instead, he began to do small things, fixing her chair, leaving fresh flowers by her bedside, carving little trinkets out of wood. She noticed. Her smiles grew, timid but real. The town gossiped. They mocked the silent rancher and his widow bride. But Eli didn't care. He was learning again, slowly, that love wasn't about untouched beginnings. It was about carrying each other's scars. One evening, Margaret sat by the fireplace, tears slipping down her cheeks as she held her old wedding band. Eli knelt before her, his rough hands trembling as he took it gently from her. Then, without words, he placed it in a small wooden box he had carved, and slipped his own simple gold band onto her finger. Her eyes widened. "Eli," she whispered. For the first time in years, his voice came strong, steady, carrying the weight of a vow. "You are my wife. Not my past. Not my mistake. Mine." And in that moment, the silence that had haunted the rancher for so long was broken, not by noise, but by love. Margaret leaned into him, her tears soaking his shirt. But this time, they were not tears of despair. They were the tears of a woman finally home. Dash dash dash. The lonely ranch was lonely no more. It echoed with her humming, his laughter slowly returning, and the quiet strength of two souls who had found each other in the wreckage of loss. Eli had asked for a virgin bride. But fate had sent him something greater. A widow with tears, and a voice strong enough to break his silence.